Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, live from Portocervo. We're here at the Yacht Club Costa Smeralda, the founder of the One Ocean Foundation. And I'd like to give you a warm welcome to our live webinar, The Value of Ocean Sustainability for Business. My name is Jan Pachner. I'm the One Ocean Foundation Secretary General, and I'll have the pleasure to guide you through today's webinar. Couple words to One Ocean. Although we are pretty young still as a foundation, I think we're accelerating in trying to network with a lot of partners and business partners. Our mission is to accelerate solutions to ocean issues by inspiring international leaders and institutions. You can see it from the partners that we work with so far. And we try to create a platform of networking. And since we don't have much time left, we believe in working a lot with our businesses and helping them to be more sustainable with a goal on ocean sustainability and obviously business for ocean sustainability. I'll have the pleasure to introduce you to the speakers of today's webinar. And we have with us Paul Rose, One Ocean Foundation ambassador, obviously very well-known explorer, journalist, BBC TV presenter, National Geographic expedition leader. So we'll come to Paul later on. Thank you very much for joining us. Francois Bailet. Francois has been working with us since already the very beginning. He's a senior legal officer, Division for Ocean Affairs and Law of the Sea at the United Nations. Thank you for joining us, Francois, out of New York. Today is also with us Stefano Bogut. He's the president of our scientific committee of the One Ocean Foundation, professor at the SDA Bocconi University and Sustainability Lab. And also with us is Federico Fumagalli, who was, is a partner obviously with McKinsey, and he was working with head of the project on business for ocean sustainability that we'll talk on today. So thank you, Federico, also for joining us. A quick brief through the agenda. You can see it on the screen. We'll be exploring opportunities created by the One Ocean, by the ocean economy for the business world, underlining the importance of assessing and implementing ocean protection initiatives within company operations. We'll get in detail on that, on how we did it and our findings. We will also take you through the latest research, Business for Ocean Sustainability, which is the second phase of that study that we started more than 2 years ago, and share some key insights with you that we revealed. This report was presented on 8th of June at the United Nations World Oceans Day. So it's still fresh from the press, and thank you for joining us today in this webinar, so you can get some insights. We will have a Q&A at the end, so we'll be open to have some questions for you from our speakers that are available to answer some of the questions. With this, let's dive into the report. We strongly believe, as I said in the beginning, in the role of business in fostering sustainable transformation. We don't have much time left, if any, so time really counts, and we strongly believe in the entrepreneurship and the business leaders that know to do right. And SDG 14 obviously is a key issue for us, life below water. So we really want to drive that sustainability aspect, and the study basically concentrated on the awareness of today's businesses on the global perspective. We also took a glimpse on today's stress factors to the ocean caused by human activity. And so we investigate on the relationship between the business world and ocean conservation, and providing insights on best practices and inspiring change. With this, I'm happy to leave the word to our first speaker, Paul Rose, and he will talk about his first-hand experience as an explorer, especially on the stress tests that we did on the reports on the global perspective today on the oceans. And I think nobody better than Paul, with his expertise, to be the testimony on that and give us some words. Thank you, Paul.
Great, thanks very much, Jan, and hello everybody. Thanks for having me along. It's great to be here at this important event. And you know, I realized while you were making the introduction, Jan, that my grandfather, if he were here today, he would be amazed that we were having an international business conference to conserve the ocean. You know, in his generation, the ocean didn't need saving. It was this powerful thing. And I still remember being on beaches with him where I was picking up rocks with oil on them, you know, where there'd been pollution, and worried. And I would have oil and, you know, the black tar on my feet from those beaches. And he would say, it doesn't matter, Paul, because the ocean just comes in and goes out and it cleans itself. And in that generation, it was an unlimited supply of food and everything. And it would have been unthinkable that we could have overfished to a point of removing species, or polluted it to a point, or treated it as a waste dump. So I sort of had my grandfather in spirit here today as the way things really have changed for us. I started diving in 1969, you know, so I feel as if I've had a lifetime of diving. And it still remains. I still remember that first dive in the English Channel where at last I was an underwater explorer, dive number 1, but in my mind I was an underwater explorer. And I was in this vibrant, vast, unexplored ecosystem. And I'm happy to say it still remains that way. It still is the most powerful, most influential, least explored, least understood, least protected ecosystem on the planet. But what we do know, and what we can see has changed, is that we have affected it. Humans have affected the ocean. And that's something that a lot of people still don't get. When we speak about climate change and the result of ocean acidification, when we speak about overfishing and the effect of that, and when we speak about pollution, it still seems very remote from people's life. You know, life goes on. People carry on, they still have careers and business investments, and life just seems to sort of carry on. We've all worked very hard to communicate ocean affairs in smart ways. You know, plastic has been a big one. I can't go to any school. Well, in the old days when I used to travel and go to schools, every single school all over the world knows about plastic, and they've got plastic projects. It's a big way of communication ocean affairs. The fish marketplace is a great place. We've got lots of smart consumers, you know, when we speak about shark finning, when we speak about tracked fish, all these things, we're learning how to communicate the value of the ocean. But one of the best ones has been smart business. You know, we now are linking smart, sustainable, ethical, profitable business decisions with nature. I came back from Davos this year, and my main take-home message after that week at Davos was that how much enthusiasm and smart reporting goes on with ESG investments, and investments being close to nature are the ones that perform the best. And to hear that from Davos was a great thing for me. We all know we need a healthy ocean. I mean, here we are, we're in the thick of COVID-19. And that, one thing we've learned from, we're getting headlines now that we would have dreamed of 6 or 9 months ago, when we see the press say that we have an out of balance relationship with nature. And the only true vaccine is to redress that balance. We're going to have vaccines from the scientists, but the long-term vaccine is to readdress that balance with nature. You know, protect what we have, restore what we've damaged, and reset our values for the future. And that's where business really fits in. We've made good progress. And of course, business is the driver for all of this. You know, we've been smart with marine protected areas. We've now got 6 million square kilometers of the ocean protected, which sounds like a lot, but percentage-wise, it's not very much. We've got satellite tracking, which has been hugely helpful for us with our marine protected areas, and we can now monitor the world's fishing fleet with extraordinary detail. But we still couldn't prosecute people. You know, it was crazy a few years ago. We could see vessels going into a marine protected area, fishing, going somewhere else, and we couldn't prosecute them. But then a few years ago, thanks to a lot of international work, we had something called the Port State Measures Agreement. And this is massive progress. And we'll all be drinking champagne soon when we see the end of illegal fishing. I think that will happen in my lifetime. Because now if we have a Panamanian registered vessel with a mixed nation crew on board, fishing in British protected waters and selling the fish in Valparaiso, Chile, this horrible mix of international law meant that we couldn't prosecute, but now we actually can. So we will all be drinking champagne, hopefully in Italy one day, Jan, to celebrate the end of illegal fishing. And now we've also got a beautiful international agreement on protecting 30% of the planet by 2030. And perhaps even more exciting, that's being pushed very smartly as a waypoint, as a point to getting 50% protected by 2050, the great E.O. Wilson half Earth. So, you know, I think that we're on the right track. I think that we are smart enough now, and we know enough to make smart decisions. And we're now prepared to be led by business and make the best of those business opportunities. This report here, if you haven't downloaded this report, and sorry to point at you, but up behind me, you'll see the little blue square is the report. So please do download that report. I found it enlightening. I found it great. I think there's a real sense of energy and leadership here coming from this kind of, you know, accurate science data. And I guess one thing that COVID has shown the world is that our scientists are right. These beautiful science data we bring back from the front line is accurate, and we do need to act on it. So in a way, I think my grandfather was right. The ocean does protect itself. It has an amazing ability to regenerate if we give it a chance, but we can't go to beyond this tipping point, as Jan says, where we can't give it a chance. And I think business can help us lead through the ethics, and it won't be long before every single politician and business chief executive will be asked this one question before they take office, and it will say, what is your relationship with the ocean? And it'll be the main question. And someone will say, well, I'm a diver, I'm a sailor. So thanks to One Ocean Foundation, I can see that dream coming true. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Paul. Thanks to all of us. I fully agree. I can also give you the testimony here from the Sardinian coast with the unfortunate circumstances of COVID. It really gave a break to the ocean also around here, and we've never had so many tuna and dolphin sightings every day, just out of the coastline. So I think we can see these testimonials all over the place, and it's good to see it also here in our backyard in Porto. Great. So that's the good news. So ocean can recover pretty fast. Thanks very much for your testimony, and I think we all should really drive to that goal of the 30%, at least 30% of marine protected areas. I think that's a key mission for us to take on. So thanks, Paul. With this, I'll hand over to Stefano Poguts, head of our scientific committee, and Stefano really worked heads on our report. So you will share with us some key results and insights on the research. Thank you, Stefano.
So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Jan, for this introduction. And I'm really pleased to join this session and participate in this adventure we started a few years ago together. And now my role is to try to introduce you into the contents of this research project that we've been developing with McKinsey, with CSIC, which is another important support of this, let's say, research, and SDA Bocconi School of Management Sustainability Lab. I would start with some element of the research before entering into the data that this slide is showing. First of all, this is a second report we've been conducting. The first one was with the focus on the Mediterranean Sea. In the second report on business for ocean sustainability, we enlarged the picture in order to have a comprehensive view or with regard to the entire economy and the business community. Thanks to our analysis, we confirmed some important data on the relevance of the ocean economy worldwide. As you can see in these slides, the ocean economy accounts for about 3.6 trillions of gross value added, and also contribute in a very relevant way to jobs, with 168 million jobs around the world. Additionally, if we look more specifically at the size of the ocean economy, it is about 3.3% of the global GDP, which makes the ocean economy the 7th largest economy in the world, which is a very important figure to memorize because it immediately, let's say, able us to understand the size of the business related to this activity. Moreover, the distribution is particularly relevant in some areas of the world. The Pacific Ocean, for example, it's extremely important in the ocean economy, or in certain areas like the Indian Ocean or Atlantic Ocean. Moving to the following slide, after this broad picture on the size of the blue economy worldwide, our research has focused, as a previous project we conducted a couple of years ago on the Mediterranean Sea, to an analysis of the scientific perspective. So we did a survey involving 56 ocean experts. This time it was worldwide, from the west to the east, from leading scientific research institutes in Europe, Americans, and Asia, and from leading universities. And the scientists evaluated 16 industrial sectors on the basis of the good environmental status descriptors, which is taken from one of the European Union directives. We have decided to investigate both direct and indirect pressure. And this is a key, let's say, element of our report. We started years ago underlying that it's not just the so-called blue economy that is impacting on the ocean. Unfortunately, pressure are coming also from a number of activities that are land-based. Paul mentioned acidification. Acidification, for example, is the result of burning fossil fuel, which is mainly a land-based activity. Similar thing is related to the plastic in the ocean, which is the result of consumption patterns that are mainly happening in land. So we need to broaden the picture, and involving the scientists, this is the final result, where on one of the axes we have the 16 industrial sectors we analyze, and on the other axis we have the main descriptor of the good environmental status. And as you see, unfortunately, there are some of these indicators that shows that patterns are compromised, like in the case of biodiversity, in the case of contaminants, and in the case, for example, of marine litter, where all the scientists converge on highlighting this high pressure, therefore the necessity to have a responsive, let's say, behavior after the damages that in the very end we are creating and generating. If we move to the following slide, this is the second part of our research, where we decided on the basis of a large database provided by a specialized company, Datamaren. We investigated more than 9,000 reports and sustainability reports worldwide, and we focus more specifically on 1,664 companies, and in the 5 continents and in 16 industrial areas or sectors. We have a sample that represents 50% of the global market capitalization. So it is a very, 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 I would say, broad picture of what is happening. Number one activity, we mapped the status in terms of SDGs. As you know, the Agenda 2030 by the United Nations is one of the largest programs that has been launched ever in the history of man with regard to sustainability. And one of the key elements are these 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. So we decided to understand how companies are approaching these SDGs, how they, let's say, communicate and report about that, how much they are accountable about the SDGs. And with the specific idea to check the attention toward the SDGs 14, which is life below water. From the picture, we see that unfortunately, let's say that the SDGs 14 is one of the less, let's say, represented, and the result is that we have a lot to do in order to increase the awareness and the responses. If you see here in the picture, the dark blue are the SDGs related to the environment, and the SDG 14 is much less reported than, for example, climate change or even biodiversity protection. Moreover, we focused on the specific sectors of the blue economy. Our idea was that companies that are working on the ocean and on the coastal ecosystem, they might be or should be more aware of the importance of the SDGs 14. And this was the result we had from our analysis. As you see in the slide, ocean economy sectors are, let's say, more likely to report on the SDGs 14 and life below water than the other sectors. This broad picture was an important element of our research. Then, if we move to the following slides, this is probably the backbone, the heart of the work we have been doing. Following the same pattern of our previous research, but with a different methodology, we try to understand the level of awareness and activation among the companies of our sample. The methodology has been different. I am a professor at a university, so I spent a couple of words. In this case, it's not a survey. We're deeply investigating using keywords and, let's say, language processing methodologies, how companies are reporting, how they are communicating about the ocean sustainability. This is a different approach. And we think that if companies are reporting, they are, of course, doing, something. This report now are somehow, they are from third party audited. At the same time, if they are not reporting, they are probably even not aware about the issue. Thanks to this approach and these methodologies, we clustered our companies in 4 different groups on the basis of the level of activation and the level of awareness. And we found that 26% are sustainability leaders. That means that are company active and aware. On the opposite, 31% of our sample of 626 companies are laggards, so they are not active and unaware. And then we have the other 2 groups that are unbalanced, one unaware, so 25% are locked in companies, so they are aware of the issue, but they are not responding. Or on the other side, they are concerned, so they are active, but they are unaware on their pressure on the marine environment. This picture is probably fundamental in our, let's say, report, because it shows what we have to do in order to try to, let's say, activate behavior on the one hand, increasing the awareness of companies. If we move to the following slide, we then deeply investigated what the leaders in sustainability are doing. And this is part of the presentation of Federico Fumagalli, so I'm not going in the detail. Just a snapshot to show you that sustainability leaders are more active than the other company. For example, in the emission management, so carbon footprint or the utilization of renewable energies, or in recycling programs. You see 82% of sustainability leaders are active with waste reduction and recovery program, while only 54% of the less aware companies are doing so. So sustainability leaders, they incorporate best practice and they do more in order to address the challenge of the sustainability and the ocean sustainability. We move to the following slide, and we move to the last part of our report. So once we let's say, mapped the size of the global blue economy. Once we analyze the scientific perception on the pressure, and we then deep dive into the behavior of the companies of our sample, one specific part of our analysis was dedicated to specifically exploring how companies are reporting, how companies are, let's say, working on the diffusion of transparency and disclosure initiative. We see from our analysis that 86% of the company in our sample adopt sustainability frameworks or standard. For example, the Global Reporting Initiative, United Nations Global Compact, or specific one like the CDP for climate change and climate risk. On the other hand, none of these standards, initiative or framework or ESG indexes is specifically designed to provide focused support and guidance on ocean-related transparency and disclosure. Therefore, we suggested that superior awareness and activation can be boosted through new dedicated initiative aimed at promoting the disclosure of data on business pressure on marine ecosystem. This is extremely important in order to increase the awareness, in order to enable, let's say, reaction and responses from the company perspective. Moreover, we developed the idea to establish a task force connected business, finance, science, civil society, and governance. This is part of the aim of the One Ocean Foundation, to proceed with the creation of a system of standard guidelines and KPI to increase the transparency on ocean sustainability. And the last element is the idea to launch an ocean index to support investor decision, increase transparency, and enhance business responsible and sustainable value creation processes. This is, let's say, the final key elements in our report from this broad perspective. I now leave the ground to Federico Fumagalli, which is, a wonderful collaborator and the leader of this project, Business for Ocean Sustainability, from McKinsey Company, who has the now responsibility to guide you into more depth analysis of business responses and best practices, and on the business case for sustainability, which is understanding whether it pays to be a sustainable company and how it pays to be a sustainable company. So I leave you the ground, Federico, for the second part of the presentation of the project.
Thank you, Stefano, and thank you to the One Ocean Foundation for the exciting work that we have done together. So I will briefly provide a view on why we believe that sustainability and ocean sustainability is becoming more and more a driver of value creation for companies. Indeed, I will come to that in a second, but we are in an unprecedented time in which there is growing convergence between the stakeholders' objectives and value creation objectives together with sustainability. And so we believe that we are living important years to make sustainability a core part and practice of the successful companies. Looking at some of the evidences that Stefano was anticipating, we have studied at company level what are the characteristics of these sustainability leaders who show a higher awareness of what their impact on the ocean is, combined with an activity that is higher compared to the rest of the peer group. So they act both in terms of knowing what their impact is and in terms of the actions that they make to sustain the ocean. And there are some characteristics that I would like to guide you through. So the first part that you see in this chart is what are some of the behaviors that they have and how do they differ to the rest of the companies. And so one of the first things that they do differently is they have a specific product innovation in order to be sustainable from an ocean standpoint. And so some characteristics such as eco-design, so integrating already in the definition of the materials to be used, and in the possibility to reuse what the companies produce is already embedded in the definition of the product itself. They also care about the materials that they use, and so they are 2 times more likely to use bioplastic and biomaterials compared to the rest of the companies. And on top of this product innovation, they combine also process innovation, and Stefano was sharing before, they are more active in emission management as well as in recycling. But I think a very important aspect on top of acting in the first place with higher awareness on sustainability is how they act on the supply chain, which is what you see on the right-hand side of this page. So one important aspect that we are observing, and this is a trend that we observe recently, is more aware companies and more active companies are more and more involving parts of their value chain. And so there are 3 parts in particular that we observe being key in supply chain sustainability. The first one is sustainable leaders select very carefully the suppliers and the distributors that they use. And we see that this happens 2 times more than in the rest of the companies. The second aspect that we observe is they monitor also how sustainable suppliers and distributors are. And then they accompany that with the third important action, which is working together, collaborating with them. And so we see more and more trainings that these companies do to their suppliers and distributors, as well as sharing of best practices. We have looked at one specific industry, and I would like to provide some examples of what it means to be sustainable throughout the supply chain. And I would move to the next page. So looking at maritime transportation, what it means to be sustainable and aware on a broad lens. This goes from the procurement and design. So what type of fuels and engines are used? And we have seen that there are some companies that go as far as studying what the possible alternatives of the fuel are, and then introducing new technologies and new engines that are more sustainable. They also take care of the impact on the ocean when in their core business, in their operations and logistics. And they collaborate with programs to reduce speed in the ocean in order to reduce the noise pollution. And they arrive as far as providing scientific support for monitoring. And so they install machinery in order to provide information for scientific research. And they integrate principles of sustainability even in waste management. So how they make sure that also the waste is reused wherever possible, and making sustainable also the last part of their production chain. We would like to provide a broader view, which we have started to study as well in our assessment of the ocean sustainability, which is companies that are more aware and more active on the ocean typically are more active and aware on a broader ESG program. And so when we look on this slide on the ESG disclosure score as measured by Bloomberg, we see that the sustainability leaders have an advantage also on the broader ESG score. And what this brings, and I would move to the next page, is we believe additional value for them. Indeed, we see that ESG, and taking now a broader perspective than just the ocean themes, first of all, there is an increasing awareness on the challenges that ESG teams pose to the entire mankind. And what we have observed with our clients is throughout the different industries, after COVID, there is an even higher awareness of the ESG themes. What I was saying at the beginning is luckily enough, the markets seem to be mature and understand that sustainability is actually a key driver of value creation. And so we observe more and more a link between being able to show commitment to ESG themes with the value creation. And the third area is there is, on the one hand, an increasing visibility on the sustainability on a broad sense. So when we see at ESG indexes, but as Stefano was anticipating, what we foresee is this will become even more central in the future. And we hope to see soon also measurement of the impact on the ocean itself. Going just for a deep dive on the value creation aspect, which I think is key in order to make sustainability a trend that is there to stay, we have studied how much a better sustainability leads to better value creation. And so on the left-hand side of this slide, you see that companies that have higher scores in terms of ESG have also a higher profitability. And this is more and more true with the passing of time. So what we have observed is that this relation becomes stronger and stronger over time, showing that markets are becoming aware of ESG as being a key way to make value creation sustainable in the long term. They are also able, companies that have higher ESG score, to have a lower risk profile, and that is recognized by a lower cost of capital for these companies. So then closing, I would like to close again on the message that Stefano passed before, which is the necessity from our standpoint of further increasing the transparency of companies' impact on the environment at large and on the ocean in particular. And so this is one of the key commitments for the future of the One Ocean Foundation, to work in parallel to the two dimensions that Stefano anticipated of, on the one hand, making more transparent the level of impact that companies are having, and on the other hand, fostering activation of positive practices across the different industries. So with that, I would leave it to Francois to close our session, and then we are happy to get your questions and feedbacks.
Well, thank you very much. Indeed, Jan and the Ocean Foundation and staff, this is a pleasure, although it's 5 in the morning. It is clearly a progress, and I say this very directly. When we launched not so long ago the foundation, we had a lot of conversations around what it could do to add meaningful value to the work of people like myself, who are engaged on the front lines of ocean governance in fishing communities and also in the United Nations General Assembly and everything in between. We talked a lot about the role of the private sector in ocean governance and different approaches that are being taken around the world, and whether or not these are effective, and how they could be meaningfully redirected. The world according to the oceans is the guiding light. We talked a lot about also capital and blue economy, but also blue finance, and how do we capture capital, and how do we ensure that capital works not only to build value of companies, but also to build sustainability. And fundamentally, I remember Jan and I having a big discussion here in New York once about what does ocean sustainability mean. I don't know if you remember, but yeah. a rainy day discussion. So I say congratulations to the foundation, because I think you've now put your finger on something that is really important, and that's the beginning of a serious discussion around how all these threads can be tied together And importantly, you have a vision on how you can impact positively or contribute positively to ocean governance as a whole. And that is real progress. So congratulations on that. And I really look forward to following your work and hopefully using your work in the things that we do around the world, from the communities all the way to the General Assembly Hall. I have the role of making some closing remarks, and I could go on for 2 hours, even though it's very early in the morning, and you're lucky I'm out of coffee already. And I say this not facetiously, but really, truly, there's a lot to unpack in what has been said. And I don't know, you must have a very mixed audience, and everybody will take away different pieces of what has been said. But I would like to emphasize at the onset that this is a tremendously complicated subject. And there is an enormous amount of thinking, of information gathering, and of reflection necessary to see through this. And I'm not saying clearly, but at least to see through it. Paul will relate that when you're sailing, sometimes you've got that fog, but you kind of know that over there is where the island is and you shouldn't go. It's that feeling of you're okay as long as you don't go 15 degrees right or 15 degrees starboard. You've done a great job at starting to lay out that. But I'm going to back up for a little minute. The first thing that I really want to mention is some of the things that Paul have said. Yes, communications around oceans is massively important. Communications around oceans has exploded. I mean, it has literally blown up. And you'll agree with me, Paul. I mean, we've both been doing this for a long time. I haven't been doing communications, but I've been working to develop ocean governance for 26 years now. And when we started, it was talking to coastal engineers about coastal dynamic processes and planning and municipal planning. And now we're talking about ocean governance. That development has been accompanied with an increase in awareness. Now we shouldn't stop. That's happening. Why shouldn't we stop? 2 reasons. The first is that we're making progress, fine, but we really need to continue to make aware as many people as possible about as many ocean-related topics as possible and their interrelationship. This is key. The interrelationship of these different issues, so that you do understand that you have impact in your everyday lives. And just because you don't live on the ocean doesn't mean that you are not actually harming the ocean, or just because you don't work in the ocean doesn't mean you can't lose your job because of an ocean-related event. That interrelationship needs to be communicated, but also because things are not looking good out there. We have come to a conclusion in the first World Ocean Assessment on the state of the marine environment that the cumulative impacts are almost pushing us over the tipping point. And in some ecosystems or some pieces of ecosystems, these have already gone beyond the ability of the system to recover. So we are really at a time, I think, as Jan said, where we don't have time. And we really need to communicate that and bring in the human capital in every sense of the word to solve these problems as quickly as possible. Stefano outlined very clearly the value of the ocean. I won't get into it. And I think these are actually conservative numbers. These are probably the most measurable, easiest numbers. But when you go into this and you really start to hang out with the various industries and you look at value chains, you realize the interrelatedness of the ocean economy with humanity and the human well-being or human livelihood reaches so far that it is unbelievable. And COVID has shown us this in very negative ways. That's a whole other webinar to have, is what has COVID taught us about ocean governance and sustainability and resilience. So no need to talk about that. I think it's all very clear. But Stefano, you end on a call to action, which is the need to create an index and a task force. And I agree with you completely. Speaking in my personal capacity, I can say that I was part of the SDGs or the MDGs before, and there was all kinds of alphabets before that. And it's a way to mobilize attention at the global level. It's a way to give a framework for stakeholders to understand and then perhaps act, and hopefully act in a unified way so that our famous 1 + 1 = more than 1.1. If you'll remember my formula from the launch of the foundation.
Yep.
Now, what we're seeing enormously, and now I'll be the grumpy uncle and say, a lot of these things, including the ESGs, Global Compact, etc., are really not indices that are getting to the there of sustainability. They're on the right path, they're mobilizing, they're getting at people's attention, they're getting boards to think about things, so they're positive. No, I'm not saying they're not. But the there of change, fundamental change necessary through the blue economy needs to be captured. And that's what I challenge your task force and the eventual creation of an index to do. Go into value chains and look at the effect on people with their feet in the water, the livelihoods of communities, the stakeholders around the resources. Create an index that measures how much value is retained and how close is it retained, and an index that measures value as part of the resource base, not value as from the inbound logistics inwards on the value chain. That's the key. If you can do something like that and draw the corporates and draw blue finance into the governance mechanism by measuring how well they're performing, let's say, before the inbound logistics component of their vision of the world, then I think you've cracked it. And it's a tall order, but I think this is where we need to go quickly if we want to mobilize meaningfully around ocean sustainability. And I'll add a few things quickly. The innovation, and Federico did a great job at showing us innovation in one sector, but innovation really needs to be fueled also in developing countries. Not only developing country innovations for developing countries, but also developing innovation that is applicable to them. And all too often, and I see this having managed World Oceans Day as a showcase of innovation this year, all too often we see a lot of cool stuff that's impactful, that looks great on here or in this place or in this application, but the scalability, and I mean scalability not necessarily where you can take it and use it, but where you can take it and it can actually have an amplified impact on the oceans in a positive way. That scalability, again, the there of scalability, is really rare. If you push some of these innovations, they don't work outside of, I don't know, a canal in Northern Europe or a really cool mega yacht that was designed to beat the blue ribbon, or et cetera, et cetera. So I would challenge also that these corporations be pushed on looking beyond their immediate value chains. And there's business case there, and I'm out of time, I know, but that in itself is also another webinar. The business case of being the first on a technology and the first to be able to scale it in a real meaningful way across developing countries. And I'll leave you with one last thought, and that is, as someone who works around the world for an international organization, please don't forget the rest of the world. It's fundamentally easy to do, especially when you start to talk about corporate engagement and you start to talk about ESGs and et cetera, meaningless. I mean, it's meaningful because it has impact on them, but it's meaningless because they're not a stakeholder in what you're talking about. Not even the best managed, most well-intended value chain management approach is really reaching down into the fishing communities, for example. So with that, I stop and I thank again the foundation and congratulate you for taking a massive step forward in what I think is the right direction. Hopefully I've challenged you again, like I did during the launch, to continue to be relevant, meaningful, and engage the right kind of communities. And I'm delighted to be here with you today and be with my friend Paul again, who I haven't seen in a long time. So we're missing Anne, and we'd have the trio.
Okay.
I wish everybody a wonderful rest of day, and I'm going to go back to bed after the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francois. Thank you very much. Appreciate it a lot. Also your words on the foundation, and we've enjoyed, as you say, our relationship since the very beginning. So thank you for your leadership and also for your inspirations from here onwards. Wise words, and I think you know the next step that is crystallizing with our intention to go for the first ocean index, I think is going to be a big step, and I think it's one of these. So we definitely want to get it right, and we'll hopefully we can come back to you and get your leadership on that, and also get us moving the right path. Because we think also, I mean, it should create added value also in regards to your UN objectives, and you know, we had our talks already in the past a bit about it, no, on governments and how this can help. But you know, money makes the world go round up until now. Maybe that's going to change someday, but hope it's not going to make the world stop. But that's why we think that an index should really, the reporting is crucial, and so far also from what Stefano said, only 7% actually is reporting on SDG 14 so far in the sustainability report. So, and there is no real standard on reporting. I mean, they're using GRI mostly, but there is no real transparent reporting as such for companies out there. So I think it's all, the leaders, as we heard, are sometimes forced to basically invent their own rules. It's sort of no man's territory at the moment. So I think the more we can foster transparency and get some standard out there, the better it is. So I fully heard your word on fishing communities and communities that are not out there, not writing sustainability reports, not being quoted on stock exchange, etc. But probably we'll have to start somewhere. So, but I hear your goal. Hope this can our future goal can drive also some support for your goals on your UN jobs.
Absolutely.
So let's start with the Q&A. Thanks for the slide. I think one question to Stefano. I heard about all the issues on the companies, but I think the supply chain, when you talk about companies, I think is a key important message as well. It's not just the company ABC, but it's also basically looking, when you take it serious, it's not only about what you do, but it's also taking the pressure on your whole supply chain. And I think that broadens also the aspect. Maybe something that also Francois highlighted on the economic impact. Couple words on that, maybe.
Yeah, the research we did with our team, with McKinsey, CSIC, and for One Ocean Foundation with SDA Bocconi, focused in this case more the supply chain perspective. I don't know how much you are familiar with supply chain activities and management. Probably you are, but when I teach my students at every level, from the executives to the undergraduate, usually I have a couple of questions for them, and one question is, do you know where the impact of some products we have in our consumption daily, where the impact is coming from? And if you take, for example, a shampoo, and you do a life cycle assessment, so an analysis from the raw material up to the end of the life of the product, more than 85% of the CO2 emission are connected to the burning of fossil fuel for heating the water. If you consider, for example, a pair of sneakers, more than 80% is in the cultivation and raw material phases. So these two examples shows you that a lot of the impact of products is in the supply chain. So addressing the supply chain is key if you want to try to fix some of the big challenge from climate change to the ocean sustainability. In this case, it is central the role of corporation and leaders in that sense, because they can put pressure through the supply chain. And if we target, I don't know, 100, 200, the 500 largest corporation in Fortune 500 list, for example, you can exercise pressure that goes upstream and downstream in order to try to, let's say, address the big problems. For a company, it's relatively easy to manage what it is controlled directly. So what is under a full governance is much more complicated to scale up upstream and downstream. That's where the challenge is. We analyze this in the report. I give, I leave to the people the possibility to go through the report to have some insights on that. But I think that this is extremely important. And you have two answers. Then I stop. One is organizational, through standards, for example, that increase transparency, again, increase the engagement of suppliers, not only tier 1, but tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, or consumer on your side. And the second is through innovation. So technological innovation is the other response, because you can incorporate new solution. Therefore, in a much more impactful way, try to address the challenges. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stefano. We received one question in regards to the report, questioning how many companies have we contacted. So this one I can answer myself. The report reached out to 1,664 companies on 5 continents and between 16 industrial sectors, as the slide also showed that we pulled up. This to answer that question. I think one more comment from my side is when we talk about innovation that also Paul touched upon. There's to give you an example on the materials used for packaging, right? Which is obviously a huge topic when you talk about microplastics and everything. I think there's generally, we're getting to quite a confusing consumer base, because you see all kind of new materials out there, and the industry is trying to to get all, from bioplastics, all kind of abbreviations that people don't know anymore even where to put it and where to throw it, and it goes from on the whole garbage sector for the cleanup. So I think there also we have to really watch out, and I think the trend, at least from what we see, we checked the website on the EU, I think is taking a very good step, being crystal clear on their new directions in regards to no plastic. So it should really be 100% organic and no bioplastics or whatever you want to call them, because even there, many consumers might not know, but even the starch that you win out of the maize probably comes from some kind of monoculture industrial fields, using up all kind of water and other processes besides transportation. So you're getting lost on the CO2 and other things. So probably have to be pretty educated by now as a consumer to make the right choices. When we talk about, Paul, question to you. Considering the pressures on marine ecosystems that have been identified, which ones do you think can be tackled more easily, rapidly? Let's try to give some positive hint to this to this webinar. Is there any quick fixes out there that you can think of?
Sure. Controlling the fishing is the first one, particularly looking at the unsustainable level of subsidies that are out there. When you look at the when you look at the subsidies that are out there and the value of those subsidies, we are supporting globally a lot of unprofitable businesses that are out there, you know, fishing luxury fish. They're not parts of normal people's diet. So it's the, and I see there's been a terrific project with the World Economic Forum on this, and I think many will have all seen it. So I think we're going to get to the end of this change in subsidies, and that's a terrific opportunity for political and business leadership. So it's controlling the fishing by reducing the subsidies, and then controlling the fishing by establishing more marine protected areas.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Jan, can I jump in here for just a few minutes? I don't want to take you too much over time, but I think this is all very fascinating. Coming off of what Paul said, I completely agree with him in that sense. That's a very important one to tackle, because it's fundamentally part of the ecosystem, and we're affecting positive change on the ecosystem and the biome as a whole. So this is the engine of life. So if we can fix the engine, we'll be better off. I would add to that, since we're talking about the corporate space, let's call it criminal activity at sea. Yeah. And I don't mean necessarily pirates, but just broadly speaking, criminal activity at sea is just like criminal activity on land. It benefits from a whole host of factors like instability, like untraceability of money, who are the beneficial owners, corruption, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of the land-based governance problems are directly applicable to the ocean. And if staying on fisheries, one of the brilliant things to look at is follow the money. Just like the world's drug trade, follow the money. There are only a few true beneficial owners of these activities, and they are hidden through corporations, of shell corporations, of offshore corporations, et cetera, et cetera. There's some fascinating documentaries on this. I'm not going to pretend to know or validate any of it, but just have a look around. And so sometimes when we affect change, for example, in the finance world, and we're looking at really where money goes and the flows of money, and knowing the clients and implementing FATCA measures, which we should be doing for all kinds of reasons, we're also doing it for the oceans. That's one piece too that I'd like to put on the table. The other piece is more on value chains and the distinction between value chains and supply chains. And I don't want to get too technical here, but I think it's very important that we understand the difference when we're moving forward. And this goes at the root of what I was saying earlier about how you measure impact, positive and negative impact. And during COVID, I think this period, from the work that I'm doing in some of the developing countries, there's a clear now awareness of the difference. And increasingly, it seems to me that value chains are being looked at carefully by the owners of the natural resources. And increasingly, corporations are going to be asked to, forced, I don't know what that dance will be yet, but they will be asked to consider, let's call it, adding value as close as possible to the resource. Mm-hmm. Shortening those value chains and adding value as close as possible to the resources. And this is normal. And again, we could have a whole workshop just on this particular topic and coastal community livelihoods. But I want to make that distinction when we're talking about value chains versus supply chains. Often they're confused, and they shouldn't be. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Francois. Nice, absolutely important point, key point. I think also for one question for Federico is, how do you think the KPIs related to ocean ecosystems could be integrated in ESG analysis? I know McKinsey did a big global report recently that was very interesting, and it was a big statement, I think, especially from coming from McKinsey headquarters on the whole role of sustainability and the businesses as such. So coming from a company like yourselves with your business, I think it's quite remarkable. It was a pretty, showed some courage. So I think you did a good step on that.
So I think the climate change is a good example of the positives and the negatives of tracing sustainability. So our work was exactly trying to make measurable the impact that the climate change will have on the businesses. And what we tried to do was exactly trying to have transparency not only on the first order effect of the climate change, but also what are the implications on the entire value and supply chain. I think here both would apply. And a similar challenge is what we have in front for ocean sustainability measurement. And so being able to trace back all the implications that are direct and indirect will be, on the one hand, a challenge, and our work on climate change spent really a lot of research, time and effort exactly to trace back all the implications of these changes. But that is also the way to make it measurable, and going to something that we were discussing before, that can translate into also higher consumer visibility of what they do. So if some of the statistics that Stefano was mentioning in terms of sustainability of individual products would be able to be translated to the final consumer, this is when we will have won. And so when the choice of a product will be a trade-off between not only price and quality overall, but price, quality, and sustainability. I think this is when a really integrated, sustainable way of consuming will sustain also the effort of companies in this respect.
Okay. Thank you very much, Federico. Thank you very much, Paul. I think we are shooting over the timeline. We're already over by 10 minutes. So thank you very much for your time, for your availability, and thank you all the participating people out there that hook up on our webinar. I hope you found it interesting. Also, discussion at the back end, and you can download the report from our website. And we'll be up live soon with something else to create more added value on our mission. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time, for your participation, and see you soon. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you, everybody. Great to be with you today. See you.
Okay, thanks.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.